I mean, this is like crazy, 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 crazy with a little crazy added on. And that is the Information Sharing Act of 2015 expired the day the government shut down. Now, it was a coincidence, and it's not. Let me explain. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 my friends. You know what time it is. It is time. It is time. Whether you're ready or not, here we go. Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. E is in the house. This has probably been one of the most interesting, exciting sort of weeks, months, quarters of being a Chief Information Security Officer, because there's just so much that's going on that impacts your company, impacts the cybersecurity of your business, your customers, your life, and even the country, that there are so many key discussions you need to be having with your executives, yet in many cases, they're not happening. So I'm going to sort of start off this episode of some key conversations that every chief officer focused on information security must have with their executive team, like ASAP. Like it should have happened already, because these are critical things that impact your ability to do your job and the ability for your company to be as secure as possible. And the target is increasing, and your executives must understand what is happening so proper decisions and shifts can be made. The first thing, and this one, the fact that it hasn't been all over the news is crazy. I mean, this is like crazy, 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 crazy with a little crazy added on. And that is the Information Sharing Act of 2015 expired the day the government shut down. Now, it was a coincidence, and it's not. Let me explain. In 2015, CISA, which is the main information security agency of the United States federal government, realized the importance of being able to exchange data between government, commercial, and commercial with commercial. And if you remember, the landscape prior to 2015 was there were a lot of people in the government that don't understand cyber or technology going in and saying that if companies disclose breaches or if companies talk about breaches, there should be liability, there should be criminal action, and other bad things to that company. So a lot of companies were like, okay, we're locking down. Like, we're not going to share information. We're not going to tell anyone about attacks. We're going to go in and fix it. We're not breaking any laws, but by going in and sharing it with others to try to help them so they're not hit by the same attack is actually going to cause liability for us. And then government agencies could come after us with both civil and criminal action. And therefore, basically, the sharing of information almost came to a halt prior to 2015. And as you know, that's really bad, because attackers don't break in to one company and go away. They don't break into one government agency. They're going to go in and use the same attack over and over and over again. So the idea of effective security between public and private sector has been proven over and over and over again to basically share information. Because today, I might get hit first, and then if I can tell you about the attack, you can fix it. And then tomorrow you get hit first, you tell me about the attack, and I can fix it before I get victimized. So it's a very smart thing. Plus, with the government having access to potentially classified information, declassifying some of that to be able to share that with commercial entities is a very important thing, because guess what? That's what's happening in China. That's what's happening in Russia. That's what's happening in our bigger adversaries in this cyber war that we're currently in. Is the government and commercial organizations are closely sharing and coordinating information to increase the security of those countries. And in the US, that wasn't happening and put us at a huge, huge disadvantage. So the CISA, being very proactive, went in and passed this Information Sharing Act. Now, some people were skeptical, going, CISA shouldn't be passing laws, right? It should be done by Congress. But you know how slow Congress and Washington, D.C. is at passing laws. So the agreement was, let's make this a temporary measure. And over the next 3 or 4 years, let's let Congress go in and do what they're supposed to. So the way this works is they put a sunset clause. And they're like, 10 years is plenty of time. Right? 2015, this is such a key issue. If we give Congress, even 5 years, probably plenty of time. So let's just put 10 years to be super, super safe. Unfortunately, they didn't act. Right? Nobody in DC or Congress passed effective laws. And it's scary. We are still one of the only countries in the world, the United States of America, superpower, one of the few countries that do not have unified federal laws on cybersecurity and data privacy. That is scary, my friends, which means we don't have unified laws on sharing of information. So why am I telling you all this? Because coincidentally, October 2025, when everyone in Washington, D.C. was so focused on the shutdown of the government, nobody went in and paid attention that the Information Sharing Act of 2015 was expiring on the same day the government shut down. And guess what happened? That act expired, which basically means there's no protection. Commercial companies no longer have protection with sharing information, and the government doesn't have protection, but it's irrelevant because the government shut down and they're not working. So they can't share information if they wanted to. So now you're in this interesting spot where the main source of information for CISOs and companies to effectively secure and protect their organizations, coming from government entities that are declassifying threat data to help companies, has basically been shut down. Then we go in, and now we can't even help each other. And I work with a lot of CISOs. I just had one of my CISO coaching calls with 35 CISOs, and we spent over an hour and a half discussing this on what to do, because one CISO actually said, Eric, I know my other peers are having similar issues, but we can't share information because we can't have the liability. We can't have the exposure that the government comes back and says we're liable for sharing data because the Protection Act has expired. So that's first critical data point that your executives need to know, that you are now operating from a disadvantage. You no longer can share information. You no longer can get data. You're independent. And therefore, your probability of increasing your threat detection and increasing your threat hunting needs to happen, because the benefit and value you used to get from getting early warning systems has been shut down. The early warning system of cyber threats in the United States has now been temporarily disabled. So that's first key thing. Second key thing that I alluded to, but there's a piece of it I want to cover. The government is shut down. Now you go in and you would think that cybersecurity was critical skills, and they would not have been furloughed. But do you realize approximately 65% of CISA, the government organization responsible for cybersecurity of our nation, only 35% of them are working? That is a huge, huge disadvantage to gathering information and data. So now the people that are supposed to be protecting securing and locking down critical infrastructure is not happening. And our foreign adversaries know this. Just go in and search or send me an email and I'll send it to you, or follow me online at on my social, Dr. Eric Cole on Instagram. And I'm doing stories on these articles about how the attacks, cyber attacks, are increasing because of the government shutdown, because they know that we're in a disadvantage. They know that we can't respond and we can't react in a timely manner. And we're seeing attacks increase from Russia and China. We're seeing attacks increase in financial, and increase in healthcare, and increase across almost all companies, small and large. So this is data that must be communicated. And the trick is, do it from a data-driven standpoint. Because one of our drivers, if you follow my Bulletproof Cyber, if you don't, what are you doing? Right? If you're following this, you should be following my Bulletproof Cyber podcast, because that gets you the mindset. This gets you the skill set, and that one gets you the mindset. So together, they're going to turn you in to a world-class CISO. One of our key rules, key drivers that dictate everything we do is let data drive decisions, not emotions. Right? We have to let the data drive it. It's easy to get emotional. It's easy to get upset. But what I'm giving you is pure play data. Now, people go, Eric, you're speculating. No, I'm not. Right? The Information Sharing Act of 2015 has expired. That is data. That's factual information. 35% of CISA is working. 65% has been furloughed. Factual data. Data-driven decisions. Right? The fact that attacks are increasing against the United States, data. The data is out there. This is not emotional. Right? This is pure play data driving decisions that your executives need to be aware of. They need to know that you have always been under attack, but now the attack surface has increased and your ability to respond has decreased. You are basically operating at a huge disadvantage while attacks are increasing. So if you go in and look at where we were in prior to October 1, whatever condition you were in, whatever the state of your cybersecurity was, you are now operating at a reduced capacity because you're not getting information from other companies and the government because of that. And the attacks against entities within the United States has increased significantly. Those are two critical data points that your executives must be aware of. And then you as a CISO must have some strategic options. One is do nothing. Second is go and do an evaluation, and maybe some systems or services that are not critical or not needed, you might want to go in and reduce your attack surface. I find every company I've worked with, and if you need help here, this is something that I'm a master at. Secure Anchor is a master at. We can come in and help you. We can do a quick review of your organization. This isn't something that takes months. Inexperienced people take months. Experienced people can do it in days and weeks because I know what to look for. We can go in and help you reduce your attack surface pretty quickly, pretty fast, to once again take back the advantage. Other thing, increase your detection capabilities utilizing AI. If attackers are utilizing artificial intelligence to attack us in a customized, systematic, strategic way, why not utilize AI as an advantage? Why not go in and get authorization to actually deploy AI cyber agents, which I know you got to be careful with this because I was a proponent 5 months ago that AI was being rolled out way too quick in organizations and it needed to be slowed down or temporarily paused until they figured it out. It was too big an exposure. Now, this was in non-cyber, but I felt that companies didn't understand AI and was rolling it out too quick. So I was going in and saying we need to roll back, limit, control, protect. But we are living in different times. We are now in wartime conditions. We are under attack, and we need to rethink our strategies. Now, I'm not saying full scale, but there's actually a few areas to me where AI detection has had huge benefits. And once again, I'm giving you the solution, but I know a lot of you like, Eric, my team has been overworked. We don't have enough folks. Not trying to sell you, but letting you know that I have services that can help you in this area. So these are things that we are masters at. I'm teaching you things that we've mastered. I'm telling you how to do it. But if you need help, we can definitely do that. But here's how you do it. I'm here to give you the solutions for free. And if you need help implementing it, we're just an email or a text message away. So the two areas that you focus AI on is two detection areas that is too hard to do manually, but AI is a master at. When attackers break into your network, what we care about is the damage. We care about the impact to the business. The reality is, if somebody breaks into my house, they come, they sit down, and they leave 5 minutes later, I don't love it. I wish they didn't do it. But the impact to me and my business is pretty minimal. But if they break into my house and they start taking stuff, hurting my family, and doing those things, that's when it becomes impactful. So why do you think the way we design alarm systems is we have internal motion sensors? So this way, even if somebody gets in, we actually can detect them once they're in. And usually motion sensors are put in critical areas. Why do we think we have video cameras in certain areas of the house? Once again, to minimize and reduce the damage. Our goal in cyber is prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. But detection without response has little value. So what we're really focused on here is not saying we'll never get an attack. I think we all crossed that bridge. Go back and listen to my 276 podcast, right? We hit that. I wish I could cover everything on every podcast, but they'd be like 3.5 hours. But the point is 100% security doesn't exist. And our goal with detection is not to stop all attacks. It's to minimize the frequency and impact. How do we make sure that the ability to get broken into is minimized and the impact is small? So reducing your attack surface handles the first one. Reduce the probability of compromise. If we go in and have less systems, less servers, less exposure points, then the probability of attack is less. So we've accomplished that first point. The second point is how do we go in and minimize damage? We minimize damage by early detection, and there's two areas. One, networks today are layered defense. Right? Very few clients have a flat network. Right? Very few clients have a server accessible from the internet, unpatched with critical data that's not encrypted. By the way, check and verify that. That's one of the things we do during attack surface mitigation is we make sure that doesn't exist. That should never, ever exist. Your systems with critical data should be many layers back in your network and require an attacker to actually break into an outer system, set up a pivot point, and then do lateral movement into the network to get to your data store. Now, that lateral movement, when they set up a pivot point and do that lateral movement, that is a deviation from normal traffic. If you go in and you take all the servers in your network, and you look at the traffic flows between each of those servers. You map all of the different traffic flows, and you build a model of normality. What is the normal traffic flow between each of those servers? When an attacker breaks in, sets up pivot points, and does lateral movement, that normality changes significantly. You see huge spikes in the frequency, the number of packets, the number of connections. I mean, it is huge, huge anomaly that if you have the ability to monitor, you can detect very fast and very quick. Now, here's the problem. That's pretty much impossible with humans. If a human had to go in and look for every single data flow between every single server, look at the number of the packets, the size of the packets, and the number of TCP and UDP connections occurring on any given segment, this could be thousands of different connection patterns. And the ability to scale that, you would need a gigantic team. But that can be done with AI. Simple. You throw an AI agent that basically says, go in and build a model of normality. I want you to calculate all these parameters for every single one. You can have 100 or 1,000 AI models. They're not expensive. They're easy to deploy. They're all doing the same thing. This is perfectly built for AI. Then you go in and say, rerun it every 30 seconds. And when you see any deviation, set off an alarm. Now you haven't increased your staff, but you've greatly increased your detection capability. And now you're catching attackers before they even get to your database, before they even get to your critical servers or your data stores. Couldn't be done in a practical way without AI, can easily scale with AI. So we need to now start embracing AI to improve our detectability. Second, if for some reason they get to your database, you need to go in and look at outbound traffic. Because when an attacker breaks into your database and starts stealing data, the amount of data being flowed out increases exponentially. This is why in most cases, the way attacks are detected is not because of the cybersecurity. It's because IT noticed that their servers all of a sudden were not operating at normal capability. Their servers were basically, they used to be at 60% and now they're 100%, or their systems were working and all of a sudden they crashed and are no longer working and no longer functioning. IT failures, and I'll get, you know where I'm going with this one. IT failures are the number one indicator of cyber attacks. Data after data after data, this is not emotion, proves and shows that that's the case. So what do? We now put agents looking at the outbound traffic, and we build a profile of normality going, okay, the outbound traffic is 60% utilization. If all of a sudden, within a 10-minute period, it jumps to 90 or 95, we set off an alarm. Same thing, all of our servers can't manually do it. It's way too intensive. But what if we now have AI agents monitoring the memory and the CPU and the performance of our databases, building these profiles of normality, and then all of a sudden when they deviate from the norm, usually I do 15%, you can tailor it to increase the true positives and decrease the false negatives on it, but now you can go in and start to get monitoring capability. Now, you as the CISO you're strategic. You're designing this. You're not implementing it. You have your staff or your team or others putting it in place. Because remember, CISOs are strategic, but now you're going to your execs with solutions. By the way, I gave you the full implementation because that's how I roll, right? I'm all about, I want the world to be safe. And if you can do it for my free advice, awesome. If you need help, that's great. I'm not going to sit here and hold you hostage. So I gave you the full implementation. When you brief your execs, you're just going to say, we can use AI to detect somebody in our network. And once a server gets compromised by looking at inflow and outflow, that's all you need to tell them. So you're presenting a strategic solution to them to be able to solve and protect the issue. Now, the longer term, before I move on to one more topic I want to cover on this podcast, the longer term solution is make sure that the encryption on your data stores is done correctly. Because here's the reality. If your data is properly encrypted, where the encryption keys are on a separate server and the keys never leave the server, and you send encrypted data through one-way data diodes or similar technology, one-way fiber optic, it decrypts and sends it back. An attacker should never, ever be able to decrypt your entire database and be able to steal 100 million records at once, right? Shouldn't be possible. Shouldn't be feasible. So that's the other piece you need to look at. And then the last piece in reducing the attack surface, we've seen this happen twice in the last 6 months, where we've had breaches of hundreds of millions of passwords breached. And it wasn't because databases were compromised. It was because end devices were compromised. Individuals' applications, their smartphones, their computers had malware on it and was stealing individual passwords from 100 million users. Imagine how scary that world is. Well, that's the world we live in. 100 million passwords just a week or two ago, and it was because 100 million devices were compromised. So we need to go in and recognize that our end users probably have compromised devices and need to recommend rebuilding, restoring, patching, and putting endpoint security on all of those. Now, once again, those are new investments, but can be rolled out relatively quickly and fast if you get the executives on board with what's happening and what's occurring within the organization. Now, last thing I want to talk about that you must talk to your executives about is cybersecurity is about 3 things: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's why we always go in and I remind people, when we're doing cyber, give me the definition. Let's go back to the basics. Cybersecurity is quite simple: understanding, managing, and mitigating risk of your critical assets being disclosed, altered, or denied access. If we break it down, cybersecurity is about risk of your critical data, protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Which means one question we must always ask is, what is our critical data and where is it located? Who is controlling and monitoring our critical data? And the problem today is too much of our critical data is out of our control. Too much of our critical data is on cloud providers that the stability and reliability is not what we thought. Within a 2-week period, AWS goes down for around 12 hours. Check the numbers, but I believe they're correct. There's difference around 12 hours. And then about a week later, Microsoft goes down for about 8 hours. Now, if we just want to look at it as what it is, what we were told, which is an emotional answer, the reason why it was an emotional answer is they didn't provide any data to back it up. If AWS really went down because of a load balancer for domain name servers, how come they didn't go in and show that that was factually true? It would be very, oh, Eric, they can't go in. I'm not asking for their entire infrastructure. I'm saying if you impacted the public and you want us to believe that you had such a minimal infrastructure that you didn't have redundancy or backup, that a load balancer could take down AWS and impact banks, hospitals, alarm companies around the world, why won't you go in and show us this was our design, we screwed up, and here's how we're going to fix it to make sure it doesn't happen again? And the answer is because, in my opinion, and this is my opinion only, that's not what happened. Amazon doesn't go down. Amazon load balancers don't fail. They don't have a single load balancer going into their Northern Virginia data center, and if it crashes, their entire AWS goes down. That's not how this company was built. They have so much redundancy and so much failover. If a load balancer went down, it would fail over to another data center, and the services would have never went down. Looking at the data, people go, Eric, you're emotional. No, I'm not. Looking at the data and what they've told us, and the fact that Amazon has so much redundancy built into their network, this looks a lot more like a cyber attack than it does a load balancer issue. And same thing, Microsoft. Microsoft said they make a configuration error. You're one of the largest companies in the world, one of the largest cloud providers, and you want me to believe you don't have CCBs, change control boards? You don't have testing, verification, and validation? And you want me to believe that somebody randomly walked into your data center, made a configuration change, and you had such minimal redundancy and failover that it took down your entire or a big portion of your infrastructure for many, many hours, right? The data doesn't add up, right? I believe what I said earlier, where the Information Sharing Act, the government close attacks increasing, these were initial attacks to see how well they respond. If I'm going to rob a bank, what do? You see this in the movies and it's accurate. You show up to the bank on normal case, you fake sort of a health issue and you see how long it takes the police to show up. So now you know when you rob the bank, you have 4 minutes to get in and out before the police show up. I believe that's what was happening here. They were going in and saying, how long does it take to respond and react and get up and running if this type of attack occurred? Now, whether you want to believe that or not, I believe giving it as an option to your executives so they recognize we're at war and this is just the beginning is an important thing to do. However, the most important thing is making them aware, are we too reliant on cloud providers? And do we need to bring some of our servers back on-prem? Do we need to start actually going back of having our own colo facility and putting servers back on? That's a conversation you have to have, because this wasn't one small cloud provider. Two of the largest cloud providers in the world within 10 days of each other went down for a considerable period of time. That's a discussion world-class CISOs have with their CEOs, COOs, and board of directors. So I've given you a lot of homework because it's been a busy week. I'd love feedback from you. Like I said, I do these podcasts not to sell, but to give you advice. But because we're in interesting times and many people are understaffed, if Secure Anchor, if Dr. Eric Cole can help you, come in and help you with a attack surface a day or two. If we can come in and help you design and build out AI automation to detect attacks and minimize impact, that's why Secure Anchor exists, to make the world a safer place. Have an amazing week. And as the proverb says, may we live in interesting times. And I hope you enjoyed this version of Life of a CISO.